They came for the art, the live performances, and the food booths, not necessarily in that order. 250,000 or so on the first weekend in June. Lately, though, attendance had been cut in half. But the biggest challenge, the board chair says, was getting new volunteers and the reluctance by some to accept new ideas.
And they just kind of started hitting roadblocks. Well, we're not going to change this because we've always done this way. Yeah, and it was like an undercurrent of resistance to change.
Did this sort of die of old age? It kind of sounds like what I'm hearing.
Pretty much. I mean, basically, the volunteers should say, you know what, we're tired. That's it. And if you don't have volunteers who are willing to, move the ball forward, then it's not going to happen. And that's just basically what it came down to.
There's also the money, higher costs, less cash coming in. Tax records show the nonprofit 501c3 got much of its funding from private foundations and sales, and just a few thousand from government grants.
A lot of the foundations, the usual suspects, a lot of them have changed their focus on what they're going to fund, and festival was falling out of that footprint.
In recent years, festival usually ended up with about $200,000 in the bank. But by the end of 2022, the last year for which records were available, festival spent $171,000 more than it took in, leaving it with a fund balance of about $10,000. Though the chair says the finances had improved somewhat since then. Faced with fewer volunteers, festival was already planning on a smaller event this year, fewer stages, a smaller downtown footprint. Then last Thursday, the board gathered for a Zoom meeting.
It's a big thing in the region. It's a really big thing. I was kind of hoping that we could, if nothing else, put it on pause, say, okay, we're not going to do it 2025. So we need to get our ducks in a row and kind of get our collective stuff together. And then come back reimagined in 2026. But the rest were just like, we're done. And of course, these are folks who've been with the festival for years.
The vote to shut it down, he says, was unanimous. In a written statement, longtime volunteer and former board member Mark Ascool wondered if festival was the victim of changing times. Quote, somewhere too many of us stopped finding community by working shoulder to shoulder as volunteers. Perhaps today we find that community through our phones instead.